The air hung heavy with grief, a palpable sorrow that seemed to seep into the very ground beneath their feet. The fog rolled in thick waves, shrouding the tombstones in a ghostly veil. A light drizzle painted the churchyard a sombre grey, each raindrop a tear from the heavens. The sky seemed to mourn with them, its overcast expanse mirroring the desolation in their hearts. Emily stood by the tiny grave, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. The world around her blurred, the edges of reality softened by her tears. Lila's favourite doll clutched tightly to her chest, a small comfort in an ocean of pain. The doll, once a source of joy, now a poignant reminder of what was lost. It was the same doll Emily now placed upon the small mound of freshly turned earth. The gesture felt both significant and futile, a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm between life and death. The priest's words washed over her, distant and hollow. His voice, meant to offer solace, seemed to come from another world, one where Lila still laughed and played. Emily barely registered their meaning. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories, each one a dagger to her heart. Her gaze remained fixed on the doll, a last vestige of her lost daughter. It was as if by staring long enough, she could will Lila back into existence. The rain intensified, drumming a mournful rhythm on the umbrella held over her by her husband, Dan, each drop a reminder of the tears they had shed and those yet to come. As the service concluded, Emily lingered. The thought of leaving Lila alone in the cold, wet ground was unbearable. She couldn't bear to leave Lila alone just yet. The grave, though freshly dug, already felt like a chasm that separated them by more than just earth. Dan gently touched her arm, his face etched with a sorrow that seemed to drown his features. His eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, spoke of sleepless nights and endless grief. "We should go, Emily," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The words were a plea, a gentle nudge towards the unbearable reality they had to face. Reluctantly, Emily allowed herself to be led away. Each step felt like a betrayal, a move further away from the daughter she would never hold again. Every step was agony, each footfall a reminder of the tiny footsteps she would never hear again. The path ahead seemed endless, a journey through a landscape of sorrow. The doll, now lying on Lila's grave, seemed to stare back at her, a silent sentinel guarding a broken promise. It was a symbol of innocence lost, a beacon of love that would never fade. The days that followed were a blur. Grief clung to Emily like a shroud, suffocating her. Dan, consumed by his own guilt and sorrow, retreated further into himself. The silence in their once happy home was deafening. One evening a package arrived. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a doll. It was eerily lifelike, crafted with exquisite detail. Its skin, pale and flawless, seemed almost real. A single name was etched on the accompanying card, Mara. There was no sender. Emily was immediately drawn to the doll. She named her Mara, a silent tribute to the daughter she had lost. Mara became her constant companion, a tangible reminder of the love that had been ripped away. She confided in the doll, whispering her hopes and fears into the unyielding silence. One night, as Emily lay in bed, Mara nestled beside her. She could have sworn she heard a whisper. "Mama," it seemed to say. Her heart pounded in her chest. She brushed it off as her grief playing tricks on her exhausted mind. The line between reality and delusion was blurring. Dan watched Emily's attachment to the doll with growing unease. It wasn't just a toy to her. It had become a surrogate for their lost daughter, Lila. Every time he saw her with it, his heart ached with a mixture of sorrow and guilt. He couldn't understand how she found solace in something so lifeless, yet he couldn't bring himself to take it away from her. It was her only comfort in a world that had become unbearably cold and empty. He saw the way she spoke to it, the way she clung to it as if it were a lifeline, Her conversations with the doll were filled with the tenderness and love she once reserved for Lila. It was as if she had transferred all her maternal instincts onto this inanimate object. Dan felt a pang of jealousy, not for the doll, but for the connection Emily had lost with him. He missed the days when they could lean on each other, but now a doll had taken his place. It was a constant, painful reminder of their loss, a loss he blamed squarely on himself. Every time he saw Emily with the doll, it was like a knife twisting in his heart. He couldn't escape the memories of that fateful day, the day that had shattered their lives. He often found himself staring at old family photos, wondering how things had gone so terribly wrong. The weight of his guilt was a burden he carried alone, unable to share it with Emily. He hadn't meant to leave the gate open. It was a momentary lapse of judgment, a fleeting distraction that had cost them everything. He replayed that moment over and over in his mind, wishing he could turn back time and fix his mistake. The open gate was a symbol of his failure, a constant reminder of the day he let his guard down. He couldn't forgive himself, and he doubted Emily ever would if she knew the truth. Lila, his little princess, had wandered out, drawn by the allure of the forbidden road. She had always been curious, always eager to explore the world around her. Dan had loved that about her, but now it was the source of his deepest regret. He could still see her tiny figure walking away, oblivious to the danger that lay ahead. That image haunted his dreams, turning them into nightmares from which he couldn't escape. The memory of that day was a searing brand on his soul. It was a wound that refused to heal, a scar that would never fade. He often found himself staring into the distance, lost in thoughts of what could have been. The house felt empty without Lila's laughter, and the silence was deafening. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed as a father, that he had let his little girl down in the worst possible way. He tried to reach out to Emily, to share his pain, but the words always caught in his throat. He wanted to tell her how sorry he was, how much he missed Lila, but he couldn't find the courage. Every time he opened his mouth, the guilt choked him, leaving him speechless. Their once vibrant conversations had turned into a painful silence, a silence that spoke volumes about their shared grief and unspoken regrets. How could he confess his culpability without shattering the fragile remnants of her heart? He feared that telling her the truth would break her completely, that she would never recover from the betrayal. He was trapped in a web of his own making, unable to move forward or go back. The weight of his secret was crushing him, but he couldn't bring himself to unburden his soul. He was a prisoner of his own guilt, and there was no escape. So he kept his distance, his silence a suffocating wall between them. He watched as Emily retreated further into her world with the doll, and he felt more isolated than ever. The distance between them grew with each passing day, and he feared they would never find their way back to each other. The house that was once filled with love and laughter had become a place of sorrow and regret. Dan felt like a ghost, haunting the empty rooms of their broken home. One night he woke to the sound of Emily talking softly. Her voice was a faint whisper, but it was enough to pull him from his restless sleep. He lay there for a moment, listening to the murmur of her words, trying to make sense of what she was saying. It was a sound that both comforted and disturbed him, a reminder of the connection she had with the doll that he could never understand. He found her in Lila's room, cradling the doll in her arms. The sight was both heartbreaking and surreal. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and sorrow. She rocked the doll gently as if it were a real child, and Dan felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to reach out to her, to pull her into his arms and tell her everything would be okay, but he couldn't move. He was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by his own emotions. "Don't worry, Mara," she crooned, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Daddy will come around. He just needs time." Her words were a dagger to his heart, a painful reminder of the distance that had grown between them. She spoke to the doll as if it were their daughter, as if it could understand her pain. Dan felt a wave of helplessness wash over him, knowing that he was the cause of her suffering. "Daddy will come around, he just needs time." Emily's voice was filled with a fragile hope, a hope that Dan wasn't sure he could live up to. He wanted to believe her words, to find solace in her optimism, but a cold dread was beginning to coil in his gut. He feared that time would only deepen the chasm between them, that they would never be able to bridge the gap created by their loss. Dan's heart twisted in his chest. He wanted to reach out, to tell her that he was trying, but the words wouldn't come. He felt like he was drowning in his own guilt, unable to find a way to the surface. The pain in Emily's eyes was a mirror of his own, and he didn't know how to heal the wounds they both carried. He wanted to believe her words, but a cold dread was beginning to coil in his gut. The fear that they would never recover from this loss, that their love would be another casualty, was a constant presence in his mind. He didn't know how to move forward, how to find a way back to the life they once had. All he knew was that he couldn't bear to lose Emily too, and he would do anything to keep that from happening. The whispers started subtly, a word here, a phrase there. They were so faint, so elusive, that Emily often wondered if she was imagining them. It was as if the very air around her was conspiring to play tricks on her mind, always in Lila's voice, always just at the edge of hearing. Emily dismissed them as figments of her grief-stricken mind. She had lost Lila only a few months ago, and the pain was still raw, still fresh. The whispers, she thought, were just another manifestation of her sorrow. But the whispers grew stronger, more frequent. They seemed to emanate from the doll itself. Mara, the doll that had once been Lila's favourite, now seemed to have a life of its own. Emily could feel the weight of its gaze, cold and unblinking, following her around the room. One morning, Emily found Mara lying on the floor, her porcelain face pressed against the cold tiles. The sight sent a chill down her spine. She distinctly remembered placing the doll on the shelf the night before. How had it ended up here? The doll had been in her arms when she fell asleep. A shiver ran down her spine. She picked up Mara, her hands trembling, and placed her back on the shelf. But the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of her mind. Later that day, she discovered Mara on the swing set in the backyard, swaying gently in the breeze. The swing set had been still just moments before. Emily's heart raced as she approached the doll, her mind racing with questions and fears. The swing set had been still just moments before. The realization hit Emily like a physical blow. Mara was moving. The whispers, the strange occurrences, it was all connected to the doll. She could no longer dismiss these events as mere coincidences. Mara was moving. The whispers, the strange occurrences, it was all connected to the doll. Emily's mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. Was it possible that the doll was haunted? The thought seemed absurd, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was at play. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her grief. She tried to rationalize it, to explain it away, but deep down a terrifying truth was beginning to dawn. The doll was not just an inanimate object, it was a vessel, a conduit for something dark and malevolent. She confided in Dan, her voice trembling with fear. She told him about the whispers, the doll's movements, and the growing sense of dread that had taken hold of her. She hoped he would understand, that he would believe her. To her dismay, he dismissed her concerns, attributing them to her grief and exhaustion. He tried to comfort her, but his words felt hollow. Emily could see the doubt in his eyes, the skepticism that he couldn't quite hide. "It's just a doll, Emily," he said, his voice strained. He tried to reassure her, to make her see reason, but his efforts only deepened her sense of isolation. She felt alone in her fear, trapped in a nightmare that no one else could see. "It can't hurt you." But his words lacked conviction. Emily could hear the uncertainty in his voice, the fear that he was trying so hard to suppress. She knew then that he was hiding something, that he was just as scared as she was. He was hiding something, Emily realized, his eyes betraying a fear he refused to acknowledge. The truth was there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. And Emily knew that she had to face it, no matter how terrifying it might be.